Okay, you could do this without a calculator. So can you find trig ratios from the unit circle? Well, we've been practicing that already, so it's kind of like review. And then this is like the new type of question that I'm going to ask. Instead of giving me the trig ratio from an angle, if I give you the ratio, can you tell me the angle from the unit circle? So we're just going backwards. Okay, so this would be a review. You'll have some questions like this on the homework. Find the sine, cosine, and tangent of this angle without a calculator. Okay. Okay, so negative 480. Well, I can't just look at my unit circle as is. What are we going to do to negative 480 so that we can use our unit circle? Add 360. And of course, we're going to have to add 360 multiple times, right? So plus 360 is going to get me to what? Negative 120. And then plus 360 again is going to get me to 240. So we're really doing like, for the sine of negative 480 degrees, we're really going to look at that 240 degree angle. Okay. So maybe before you look at your unit circle, think about if you know the 240 angle and its coordinates. If I was doing this from my first quadrant, does anybody know which bow tie the 240 is without like looking? 240 is part of which bow tie? 30, 45, or 60? 60. 60, because 240 minus 180, we're thinking about reference angles, is 60 degrees. So I could use like my hand trick right there for my 60 degree. That's going to be the ordered pair 1/2 and square root 3 over 2. But since this is in the third quadrant, they're both going to be negatives, right? So this is negative 1/2 and negative square root 3 over 2. You can also, as you're doing your homework, look at your unit circle to get that coordinate, right? But you want to sort of like be weaning yourself off of the unit circle because at some point you're not going to be able to use it, right? You have to know it. Well, the sine is y, and the cosine is x, and the tangent in quadrant 3 will be what sign, positive or negative? Positive, all students take. Okay, so it's going to be a positive. And does anybody remember the sine, or sorry, not the sine, the tangent for 60 degrees? Radical 3. I didn't even really have to do y divided by x, because I know it from quadrant 1. Now, if you don't know the tangents, you're going to have to do that extra work, right? You're going to have to take negative square root 3 over 2, divide it by negative 1/2, which is really multiplying by the reciprocal, and you will get the same answer, positive square root 3. Cool? Yep. So you'll have some problems like that here in just a minute. You'll have some problems on the homework where it will, instead of having you do like the 3 basic ratios, it'll just have you do one of them. So we're just going to try to do the cotangent of negative 13 pi over 6. We have the same issue, right? Not on the unit circle. So start doing coterminal angles. When I'm adding, because I would be adding 2 pi, it's in radians. Remember, just double this denominator. So that's going to be add 12 pi over 6, which will get me to negative pi over 6. And then I would add 12 pi over 6 again, and that's really 11 pi over 6. Now, some of you, when you get to negative pi over 6, you're like, oh yeah, that's the 11 pi over 6 in quadrant 4, right? So if you don't add it twice, but just make sure that you're getting the right angle so you get the right signs of your coordinates. So I'm going to try to think about 11 pi over 6 without my calculator, okay, without my unit circle. Pi over 6 bow tie or butterfly is the same as 30 degrees. So I can put away that pi over 6 or 30 degrees on my hand. Its ordered pair is the square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2. In quadrant 4, it'll be positive, negative. So this is positive square root of 3 over 2 and negative 1/2. You can also look on your unit circle and verify that. Okay, on this one, if you wanted to, for cotangent, you could just do x over y, right? Or you could think about, like, what is the tangent of pi over 6? Or, sorry, tangent of 11 pi over 6.
If we knew the tangent of pi over 6, do we have to, like, know the sine and the cosine?
So, like, you could do x divided by y right here. Okay? Or, if you think about it, like, what is the tangent of 11 pi over 6? Of course, it matches the tangent of pi over 6 in quadrant 1, which is square root 3 over 3, right? But in quadrant 4, tangent will be negative. So you might also be thinking the tangent of 11 pi over 6 is negative square root 3 over 3. What's the reciprocal to that? Do you suppose? Negative radical 3. I mean, like, eventually you'll be doing these so many times that you won't actually have to do the work. Like, if you see square root 3 over 3, the reciprocal of that is square root 3. If you don't know that, you could always flip it, right? So then the cotangent of 11 pi over 6, if I want to do the actual work, would be negative 3 over square root 3. I would have to rationalize. That's negative 3 square root 3 over 3, and then the 3's cancel. But I don't want to do that every time. I'm going to, like, notice that these things keep occurring, okay? And then, like I said, if you didn't know cotangent, you could have also thought about is x over y. So you could have done square root 3 over 2 times the reciprocal, negative 2, and you would have got negative square root 3. There's lots of different ways for you to get that answer without a calculator. Okay, last thing that we'll talk about is going backwards. So, like, notice in this example and the previous example, I'm giving you an angle, whether it be in degrees or radians. I'm providing you the angle, the theta. My next set of questions, if you just kind of look at the question, is going to say what the trig that we're looking at, the function is, the sine of theta, but it's going to give me the ratio. So up here in the directions, it'll say find two solutions of the equation. Give your answers in degrees from 0 to 360 and in radians from 0 to 2 pi. So there's two answers in degrees because around the unit circle there's like two quadrants where your sine is positive, two quadrants where your sine is negative, same for cosine and tangent. And then you'll also give those angles in radians. So this will help us, like if we're struggling with the angles, this is good practice for you for naming the angles in both forms. But again, you should be getting all of this without a calculator. And I think you did these problems last year in Algebra 2, if you're coming from Algebra 2. So we have the sine of theta is equal to negative square root 2 over 2. Here's what I'm thinking about. Sine is which coordinate? Y's. When y is negative, you are going down. So you're in quadrant 3 and 4. What angles in quadrants 3 and 4 have signs that are negative square root 2 over 2? They're the ones that are in the same bow tie as 45s, right? So in quadrant 3, that angle is 180 plus 45, 225. In quadrant 4, that's 360 minus 45, 315. And then I just have to name those in radians too. So that would be what, this one is the 5 pi over 4. Yep. This one is the 7 pi over 4. Okay. Questions you want to ask me? Yes.
Could you use the like for one of the answers it could be like negative 45 or like negative pi over 4?
Not based on the directions. So the directions that we'll be working with will always ask you, like when you're naming the angles, for them to be in a certain range. At some point, we're going to do something called an inverse trig function, and this is really going to mess with some people. But when we do the inverse trig function, yes, the answer will be negative instead of these on the unit circle. But for right now, the directions say in that positive range. Okay, that's a good question. Okay. Let's see, maybe we'll do one more example, and then you tell me if you want to do another. Let's do tangent theta is undefined. Okay. Tangent theta is undefined. What has to be true in order for you to get an undefined answer? 0 has to be in the denominator. So if you're thinking about tangent, isn't tangent defined as y divided by x? So that means that your x has to be 0. You're not moving left or right. Therefore, you're on the vertical axis. What angles are those? 90 and 270. Okay, so you're answering 90 degrees and 270 degrees. And in radians, that's pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. If I was doing one like the next one, secant of theta equals 2, I would think, I don't know secants around the unit circle, but I do know cosines. So I would change it, that's the cosine of theta equals 1/2. So I can make the reciprocal to secant, and then I just have to flip the reciprocal of the ratio. And those, when cosine is positive, you're going to the right. That's what? 60 degrees and 300 degrees. Okay, quadrants 1 and 4 is cosine is positive. So that's pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3. Okay. So we've got about 10 minutes left. Okay, I want you working on the homework assignment. You can kind of look it over and decide which problems you maybe want to start with. Do you feel like you're really confused about this whole finding angles thing? Or are you really confused about the ratios, still finding angles on the unit, or finding trig ratios on the unit circle? Let me know.